Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election in a scenario if Joe Biden drops out of the race at the very last second, and that means Kamala Harris, the current vice president, would be forced to take on Donald Trump in this election. Now, this might or might not happen. At this point, it looks like Biden will be taking on Donald Trump as they will be debating this month. But before we get started with the map, make sure you guys are subscribed and click the bell so you don't miss out on any of my content. Also, we have memberships, so if you're interested, you can find a link to that in the description section. Don't forget, we are approaching 3,000 subscribers. Now back to the topic of today's video. I'm going to be filling out the 2024 electoral map in a scenario in which Kamala Harris, in a hypothetical, situation, were to take on Donald Trump. And now, mind you, that she is very disapproved of. And she currently has an approval rating of roughly 38% according to 538, which is below 40%. And typically, any incumbent, whether it's the vice president or, president itself, who has below 40% approval, typically does not win re-election going back to history. Anybody, above 40% usually wins the election. But if you're below 40%, and in this case, Kamala Harris is at 38, then you're most likely not going to win re-election. And right off the bat, I can guarantee you both Iowa and Ohio would be solid red states for the former president. He should comfortably win them by double digits if he were to, face off Kamala Harris. And I also do think that typically solid blue states would, get closer and the margins would narrow up. And it would become likely because the candidate on the Democratic side is just so bad, in this case Kamala Harris, in this hypothetical scenario, if Joe Biden were to drop out at the very last moment for health reasons. I think Washington State would drop down to likely. She would only win it by like 9%, as well as Oregon would also be decided within 7 to 10 points. As well as a state like New Jersey would actually be lean for Kamala Harris. She'd only win that by like 5% if she were to take on Donald Trump. And as well as New York would also be likely, considering the high, crime rate in this state, as well as Illinois would drop down from a solid blue state to a likely blue state because Kamala Harris is just that unpopular of a candidate on the Democratic side. And obviously, a majority of people agree that Joe Biden is far better than Kamala Harris if she were to be the president. And so if, everything is bad with Biden right now, imagine if Kamala Harris was president, it would be way worse than Biden. I also do think that both Texas and Florida would be comfortable for Donald Trump. He should win those by like around 10%, considering that we have a major border crisis and immigration is the number one priority issue other than the economy and inflation. Record illegal border crossings, and if that's the case, then I honestly think that Texas would very well go to Donald Trump by a historic margin, especially if Kamala Harris is a Democratic nominee instead of Joe Biden. I think Hispanics have shifted towards the right, especially in Florida. Cuban Americans specifically are trending towards the right. Ron DeSantis flipped Miami-Dade County in the 2022 midterms. And Republicans have gained tremendously in terms of new registered voters. They now lead by 900,000 in the state of Florida, in which 4 years ago, Democrats had been leading. And so these are major changes in terms of demographics, among key minority groups, as well as African-American voters in the state of Georgia. I think Trump would win Georgia by a likely margin. If you were to go against Kamala Harris, you'd probably win that state by like 6 points. As well as a state like North Carolina, which in my opinion is slightly more red than Georgia is, because when Georgia flipped to Biden back in 2020, North Carolina stayed red and they voted for Trump by 1.5%. So you can see, based off the 2020 election, that North Carolina is more red than Georgia is. And despite if Mark Robinson does or does not win on the governorship, I still expect Trump to outperform him overall. And regardless if Biden or Harris is the nominee, I still think both of them should defeat Donald Trump in the state of Colorado and as well as New Mexico by a lean margin in this scenario if it's Kamala Harris. If it's Joe Biden, then he would win both of them by likely margins instead of lean ones. I just think both of these states are really anti-Trump. And Colorado is actually getting bluer, believe it or not, and New Mexico is, typically not a really Trumpy type of state, so I just don't see Trump doing well. And when Trump versed Hillary Clinton back in the 2016 election, which is far worse than Biden, she really comfortably won the state of New Mexico by like 8 points. So I definitely don't see Donald Trump winning this state, even if he does face Kamala Harris. I just don't see it. But it's going to be way closer than if you were to face Joe Biden, guarantee you that. I think Trump would win Nevada, Arizona, and even a state like Wisconsin and some of these other Rust Belt states like Michigan and Pennsylvania that can ultimately decide the outcome of the 2024 election by a lean margin of somewhere in between like 1 to 4%. Starting off in Nevada, I think if Trump can make gains in Washoe County or Reno County, I think he can do very well in this state. And as for Clark County, it's basically the only thing that's holding Donald Trump back from actually flipping the state. And I can guarantee you, if the nominee is Kamala Harris on the Democratic ticket, Donald Trump is more than likely going to flip the state, even though he already pretty much is against Joe Biden. I just think he would do better against Harris than he would against Biden. So, theoretically speaking, I think Trump would win Nevada by like 5 points if he were to go up against Kamala Harris when Joe Biden, or if he does, drop out at the last moment due to health reasons. He's getting up there in age, obviously. And then as for Arizona, I think Trump can make gains in Maricopa County. Honestly, this whole entire state is going to come down to ultimately Maricopa County at the end of the day. And if the ticket on the Democratic side is Kamala Harris, then Trump is more than likely going to flip this state, even though he already is, according to the polls, versus Joe Biden. I just think it would be a greater margin if it was Kamala over Biden. And if it's true that immigration is the number one priority issue to a lot of these voters, other than the economy and inflation, I can definitely see Donald Trump taking back this state. But if we're talking about a future election like 2028, I can definitely see Arizona actually going to the Democrat because this state is a left trendy state. Democrats have been making gains. They just recently elected a Democratic governor who ran a disastrous campaign, Katie Hobbs. And so if she ran a bad campaign but she still won, that really proves that Arizona is a truly blues trendy state in the future. And then as for Wisconsin, I think this state is very flippable for the Donald Trump. I think if he's able to run up the numbers and some of these stronghold Republican counties like Green Bay, then in this state, I think he can win this. And also in Milwaukee, if Kamala Harris does not hold up to Biden's numbers, which she's obviously not going to, she's not going to win Wisconsin in 2024. And out of the 3 Rust Belt states back in the 2020 election, Wisconsin was the closest. It was closer than Michigan and Pennsylvania. And Biden only won it by 20,000 votes. So I can definitely see Trump flipping 20,000 if it's Kamala for sure. She literally does not even have a base at all. And then as for Michigan, more than likely Trump's going to win this state if he does go up against Kamala. You already saw what happened to Biden in the primaries. Trump received more votes than him, and he was literally going up against Nikki Haley, a real challenger or opponent. Biden, on the other hand, had literally no opposition, no primary contest, and still received less votes than Donald Trump as an incumbent, which is a disaster for him. And especially if it's Kamala Harris, she's going to do much worse than Biden, on top of the 100,000 people that already voted uncommitted. And as for Pennsylvania, I can see Trump flipping back Erie County. He won it in 2016, but Biden flipped it in 2020. And if Kamala Harris replaces Biden, then I can definitely see Trump flipping that. I also think Trump could make gains in Central County, and I think he can run up the numbers in those Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia or the Pittsburgh suburbs, especially if the nominee ends up being Kamala Harris in a hypothetical scenario. And keep in mind that Biden, it's his home state. He has name recognition here, so if he's not the nominee and it's Kamala Harris, she won't have a base in this state. The only reason why Biden can actually win Pennsylvania in 2024 is because it's his home state. Otherwise, he literally has no base, and if it's Kamala Harris, she really doesn't have any base in this state. So that's easy flip for Donald Trump. And Trump is leading in the state in the polls by a couple points against Biden. So imagine if it's Harris, Trump probably going to win it by like 4 points instead of 2. And we have 3 more states before we end off this video: Minnesota, Virginia, and New Hampshire, in which I have all of them going to Donald Trump by tilt margins if he were to face off Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden. Democrats don't have that momentum that they had in 2020 from, BLM in this state of Minnesota that really pushed suburbs here towards the left. So because they don't have that momentum, I really see this state getting closer. And if it's definitely Kamala Harris as a nominee, I definitely can see the state flipping because she's just going to be an utter failure disaster, even worse than Hillary Clinton. Keep in mind, in 2016, Trump actually almost won this state, and Kamala Harris is far worse than Hillary Clinton. So I can imagine if Hillary Clinton only won this state by like 1 to 2%, then what will Kamala Harris's margin be? Way closer than that. And if 1 to 2% for Hillary Clinton is close, I think Trump's going to defeat Kamala Harris in the state of Minnesota. Also, in Virginia, there's a new poll that showed it a tied race at 42 to 42% with Trump and Biden. And keep in mind that Biden is better than, Kamala Harris. And so if Harris is the nominee, then she would perform worse than Biden. And if it's not a tie, then it's definitely tilt for Donald Trump. And he got endorsed here by the governor, Glenn Youngkin, who's very popular. So that alone can sway the race in favor for the former president. And then as for New Hampshire, this is a very anti-incumbent state, and Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president at the very moment. And so I definitely can see this state flipping to Trump, considering that when Trump faced Hillary Clinton in 2016, he almost won this state. She narrowly won it by like under percentage point. And so if it's Kamala Harris, she's obviously going to be worse than both Biden and Clinton. And so I can definitely see Donald Trump winning New Hampshire if he does end up facing off Kamala Harris. And before we end off this video, we do have some of these districts, for example, Nebraska 2nd, and also Maine's at large. I do think Trump's going to, flip Nebraska 2nd, which Biden won it back in 2020, because she's just an utter disaster of a candidate. And then as for Maine, I think independent candidates typically do well in this state. For example, RFK, you have Jill Stein, and you have Cornel West. So it can open up the table for Donald Trump to perform very well in the state of Maine. And for sure, definitely, if it's Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, replacing Joe Biden, because, in a scenario hypothetical where he drops out at the very last moment due to health reasons because he's getting up there in age, I think Maine's at large would still go to the Democrats, but Kamala Harris would only win it by like a tilt margin. And I think if Trump does perform well in Maine's at large, it's probably because the third party vote share will be large and it can narrow up this race and it'll help Donald Trump at the end of the day, but ultimately she's still going to win it. So this is the finalized map if Kamala Harris was the nominee replacing Joe Biden. 340 electoral votes for Donald Trump to Kamala Harris's 198. Wow, she can't even get to 200. So let me know your overall thoughts on the map and these margins in the comment section down below. What states you agree with or disagree with and why? And do you think Kamala Harris will replace Joe Biden? Why or why not? One last final reminder before I end out this video is to subscribe as we're approaching 3,000 and click the bell so you don't miss out on any of my content. Also, we have memberships. You can find the link to that in the description section. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.